CNTV. It is the first in our history, a town hall, and what a tremendous group of guests, an honorable group indeed. This is a town hall on the media's sexualization and abuse of children. We're featuring tonight Judith A. Reisman. Dr. Reisman is notable for the Reisman Institute, an institution that protects children and has been doing so for a number of decades in terms of a force against sexual harassment, child trafficking, human trafficking, sexual abuse. Her great analysis of the Kinsey report has buttressed the conservative movement against the social media and the media wings of entertainment that have chosen to use our children, as in the movie Cuties, to be sex toys rather than to recognize them as children. It is a tremendous honor to have her here with us tonight. Also joining us is Jon Uhler. Jon Uhler, who has spent a number of years in and out of the penal system, not individually, of course, not because of anything he's done, but because of his study of those individuals who have advantaged children and adults sexually over the years. And so we are just so ecstatic to have these two people here on this night. This is the night before Halloween. And yeah, well, I'm Ken McClenton. I'm TEC TV president. This is the night before Halloween. And on these particular nights, ladies and gentlemen, we really see how fundamentally the entertainment industry, the social media, the YouTubes, the Googles, the TikToks have influenced the wear of our children, and in fact influenced parents into dressing them in certain attire that is highly provocative, almost sensational. Well, I don't know, over the past years, it seems that the sensation has been toned down in the sense of, quite frankly, people accepting it as a way of life. And so we're going to be talking with both of these great minds in psychology about how the media has sexualized our children and what you can do about it. Without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Judith Reisman. It's a tremendous honor to have you here with us tonight. And Jon Uhler, great job with you all having been here tonight. I want to give you each an opportunity to discuss what your organization is about. Firstly, I want to go to Dr. Reisman, if you would. All the years that you have spent fighting against Playboy, Hustler, you name the entity in the marketplace of sexual entertainment, you have been the lead knight in armor going against them in protection of our children. If you would, can you tell us what the Reisman Institute is all about and why you started it and what it does to protect our children?
Thanks for giving me a chance to speak to your public, Ken. We try to provide documents, research papers, and we give presentations to the public, to people who are interested in these issues, in protecting our children. That would be people who are interested in protecting our children in the schools and in our general environment, because the children have been so terribly sexualized, hypersexualized, not even sexualized, it's hypersexualized, for the past, I would say 20 years, but it's been increasing and increasing and increasing. About cuties, we had an interesting thing. There was a gentleman who had a radio show called something about boots. I've forgotten the name of it. And it was a talk show. It was just after the Cuties furor. And he had some guests on the show. And he said, I'm going to call up a Halloween store, a Halloween place that sells or rents Halloween costumes. And I'm going to ask them for a costume for my 5-year-old as a sexy nurse. Yeah.
Oh,
And he thought it was very funny, and the group with him thought it was very funny. And he said, well, I guess I got all that from Cuties. So the impact of one film on the whole society is typified in that kind of remark. I got that idea from Cuties. Yeah. Um,
wow.
our institute really just tries to educate folks about what's going on in our schools, why, the history of our sexual revolution, which most people don't even know we had if they're under 50. Yeah.
Yes.
They think, yeah, they think it's always been like this. Yeah. And so we have a lot of historical information that people need to understand in order to understand what is happening to them, to the individuals, and to their family members. So we focus on the issue of pornography, what's called soft, as well, which is, with the old time Playboy,
Yeah.
all the way to hard. Well, I mean, Cuties has more in it than Playboy had in the old days.
Wow.
So we focus on that. We focus on sex education in the schools, which is a disaster. And we focus on general mass media entertainment and try to help people understand what they see and how to interpret it
Terrific.
and go against it in the courtrooms. We
Exactly.
deal with court cases as well. We certainly deal with court cases as well.
And you are certainly a vigilante in the courtroom of America. We appreciate you greatly, and I am always honored to be in your company. Jon Uhler, this particular evening, is with us tonight, and Thanksgiving for him being here. He has had direct research regarding the prison system and those individuals in and out of it who participate in the offense, the sexual offense of children. Jon, if you would, tell us about Church Protect and also SurvivorSupport.net.
Sure. Ken, it's a pleasure to be with you and to be with Judith. ChurchProtect.org was the original site that I developed to train churches, though other organizations as well, but primarily churches, to understand the nature of the most sophisticated predators, child predators, because the most sophisticated will actually target churches.
Yes.
And I myself, with a ministry background, I had never been taught that. So I felt compelled after, by that time it was a decade, but I ended up retiring from the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections after 11 years. Felt compelled to try to help churches, church leaders, congregations understand that they tend to be looking for the minor type of threat, though any threat is a threat.
Yes.
And then from that was born SurvivorSupport.net, because the primary concern that I have is for churches not only to protect survivors or protect kids and others, but also to understand that about 40% of every congregation or 40% of any given group out there has people within it that are survivors of sexual abuse or have had some sort of exploitation take place in their life. And so SurvivorSupport.net is the umbrella organization for ChurchProtect.org. And we seek to help educate those that want to better support survivors and to support survivors themselves. So that is our mission.
Jon, we thank you so much for being here tonight. It is a great honor to be in your midst because of the great expertise that you all have. I want to first broach the issue because of the ideas of social science and research. The whole idea of what is modern day psychology in the sense of our children, and is it being exploited, or is it there to exploit our children? I want to start with you, Dr. Judith. It's what is modern psychology, and has it changed over the years from when you originally began to practice it?
Well, I was never a practicing psychologist.
Yes.
My expertise had always been in mass media effects. That was my degree. But I'm in the Department of Psychology because everything that has to do with mass media effects depends on the psychology that people bring
Yeah.
to their experience and what they learn. Yeah, psychology, unfortunately, does not come to grips sufficiently, as far as I'm concerned, with the mass media effects, the way images impact the human brain,
Mm-hmm.
and much more than text, the way pornography has absolutely shaped everyone's lives in some way or another, and the conditioning process that all of us are going through the media is something that psychology does not tackle properly at all. And of course, our legal system. I worked in the law department first for 6 years,
Yes.
and our lawyers do not understand the impact that media, images, psychology have on the behavior of predators and victims. So that very often victims are not treated properly, really, because the neither the lawyer nor the psychologist understands what the victim goes through and how long it takes for most victims of sexual offenses, yeah,
Yeah.
to come to any real awareness, logical, grappling awareness with what has happened to them, and to take a position, to take strong action to protect themselves. And one of the strongest actions they can take is to sue predators,
Wow.
is to sue the guys who have offended them. And to do that, they have to get lawyers who are willing to take their cases and who can deal with the statute of limitations, because we have statutes of limitations that absolutely cripple the average person who has been victimized, and they are unable to come forward because of the statute of limitations. So all this is in the recent 20 years, 30 years, 40, as we become increasingly dysfunctional
Yeah.
as a society, as a culture, the nation, as the global culture. And there we are with our victims everywhere you turn. In any group, in a group of children, for example, you're going to have, say, 1 in 4 girls by the time they're in high school. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys has been sexually abused.
Whoa.
And how long it takes them to be able to handle that, to express that, to know what was done to them, to get the strength and the identity, strength in their identity, to come against the predator. And then you're dealing with the issue of how long it takes, for statute of limitations holds out. So we have all these complications which really have to be taken care of, but they cannot be taken care of until until our legislators have a grip, and a lot of our legislators are under other, they're themselves having problems. Our legislators have a grip on how this all happened, how we were manipulated to become this dysfunctional in the first place.
Exactly.
Which brings us back to Kinsey.
Exactly. And I'm going to come back to you in terms of that, but I'm going to give Jon an opportunity to discuss as well. What notable changes have you seen in the world of psychology since you began to practice within it? And is it geared more so to manipulate the client than actually help them solve their problems?
The latter is a good question. I think that may come down to each individual clinician. But I would say, probably from my perspective, if I have a concern about psychology, and speaking of the profession of psychology or secular psychology, it is how it has been able to be used as a tool to normalize sexual deviance, and it really piggybacks off of what Judith, all her research, and behind it all was really Kinsey, that what once upon a time was illegal, if you can pathologize that, then you can make it so that the perpetrator or someone who is sexually deviant is not viewed as so much being responsible as it is suffering from, or as he then suffers from, some condition. And you can do that long enough to where very deviant and aberrant behavior becomes reframed and eventually normalized, or accommodations are made for them. I think the two things that we're seeing now, which it's been years in the making, decades in the making, and it really stems from my perspective. Judith has spoken to it. She really did the heavy lifting as far as uncovering the role that Kinsey has played in shaping public opinion, public narrative, legal opinions, legislation. But I think what we're seeing now is a move eventually toward, well, I know we are, toward normalizing and decriminalizing pedophilia. And then what we're seeing in what I call the trans deception. So the trans movement, as a matter of fact, you would have no trans movement without psychology. There were 13 individuals that made up the working group for the DSM-5. And with the newest edition, the DSM-5, suddenly what was a rarely seen issue or disorder, gender dysphoria, suddenly became a major focus. And so without gender dysphoria, you have no transgender related issues. So it made it possible to introduce the concept of what we're hearing, all these different things, but binary and non-binary and gender fluidity, all of that comes from the DSM-5 laying the groundwork for that. And prior to 2005, you never saw this. In all my years of practice, especially working with kids in the system and kids in residential treatment. And if you're ever going to find anything that's true about kids, as far as them being honest about things that they're dealing with, because they have no filter, it's going to be in that setting. And myself and my colleagues, along with in any college textbook, any of the grad school textbooks, there was never a reference to, prior to 2005, anything to do with gender dysphoria, really. And myself and my colleagues had never dealt with the case. It just didn't exist. So this is a grand man-made psychological ruse as far as the transgender trans movement that is really, in my mind, taking the world by storm it is as dangerous to the psyche as the coronavirus is to one's health, and it's spreading that quickly.
I want to ask both of you here tonight. Um, I just think it's the miracle of science that a diagnosis was literally vanquished by a vote of the American Psychological Association. I've never heard of any great healing that was ever done merely because people voted it away. So I want to give you all the opportunity. I want to start with uh, Dr. Reisman. What magical formula, what hocus pocus was done to heal LGBTQRSTUVW and add the P? When was that magically healed by the psychiatry and psychology industry?
Well, the American Psychiatric Association, and what was it, John? Let's see, their DSM two, I don't remember which one, was when their very first break was when they determined, based on Dr. Kinsey and a little bit based on Hooker, that homosexuality was normal. You know, we up until that point, the assumption was that, well, the findings were that homosexuality existed amongst such a small number of men, largely men, and that pretty much you could identify early sexual abuse as part of that experience, resulting in the decision to be homosexual. So that was determined um, to be normal, natural, based on Kinsey. And the American Psychiatric Association, those people who agreed, there was a storming of the doctors to get an agreement, a storming of the dais where everybody was. And so that was created as a norm, as a normal experience. And of course, Kinsey's data were used to say that 10 to 37, actually 47%, as much as could be, of guys were really just naturally homosexual during some portion of their time, experiencing this, going for orgasm and so on. And it was that basis that upon that basis, that the American Psychiatric Association created a norm that did not exist before. From that norm came all other norms that did not exist before, that had been pathological, that people had dealt with in psychiatric situations, with therapy, to try and understand what had caused this dysfunction to take place. And suddenly, that was no longer acceptable to find out why. And I recall it was Gebhard. No, it was one of Kinsey's co-authors who wrote in the Journal of Human Sexuality, I think it was, one place, in which he said, we must not locate the causes of homosexuality or bisexuality. By that time, it was stretching. We must not locate the causes of homosexuality or bisexuality, because that way is a political issue.
Yes.
We have to avoid that. And so we have to establish it as normal and natural. And from that came the bisexuality being a norm. From that came the next step, until we end up with transgender, LGBTQRST, and so on. Everything becomes normal. There's no cause. There's never a dysfunctional cause for anything that causes someone to decide they're a boy, tomorrow they're a girl, for someone indeed to engage in rape. We've had defensive rape,
Yes.
and the NAMBLA, all because somebody is oriented in that way, and that's the approach that's being taken to pedophilia, which I call pedosadism today, is that it's an orientation, just as all these others are orientations. Pedosexuality, pedosadism is just someone's natural orientation, born that way. And just as babies are born sexual, said Kinsey, some are born lusting after other kids, kind of thing, and then they grow up and they still lust after kids. So that's one of the arguments that we've been presented with.
Wow. Jon, literally, in a nutshell, then, if it's normal for a guy to have sexual relations with another guy, if it's normal for a girl to have sexual relations with another girl, then by the grace of God, it must be His will that boys have sex with men and ladies have sex with girls. Am I right in this regard?
You've read the script. Once you open the Pandora's box, then anything goes. They will ultimately go after the issue of what is normal. And so that becomes a point of focus as far as they have termed that as being judgmental. So, and we see it playing out in all areas of our society now. Who are any of us to say what is or isn't normal or right or wrong? So once you get away from that, once you have a postmodern society, then there's no standards, there's no basis, there's no objective criteria, and anything goes. And so we're really seeing what, for those of us that come from a Christian perspective, Paul wrote about it 2,000 years ago in Romans chapter 1. Once you get off what's called the path of life, where you value life from God's perspective and establish parameters based upon what God has established, especially in terms of our sex and sexuality.
Yes.
Once you diverge from that, then you get on a slippery slope, and it always leads in the same direction. And as I was working with the guys that I worked with Judith's material in my mind, because she did a tremendous job in helping me and helping others understand the power of pornography and what's happened. What Kinsey did, he just manufactured. He came up with stuff, and he perped on kids in his research. So it's the big lie theory, and that's why it's very similar to what Kinsey did, and then the others that are pushing the trans deception. It is very cult-like, meaning they manipulate people just as cult leaders do. And so what we're seeing is a manipulation of terminology, of language, removing standards and boundaries. And so it inevitably proceeds downward, eventually to sexual degradation, and that becomes the norm.
Dr. Judith, I got to ask you here. I respect and I honor your great wisdom and tremendous amount of research in this particular area. But who are you to speak against Dr. Alfred Kinsey? He did such marvelous work to bring us out of the doldrums of Christendom into a robust, modern, sexual sexual revolution. How dare you?
Yeah. Well, it's simple. The documents speak for themselves.
Tell us about Dr. Kinsey.
Well, I said he turns out to be a pornography addict. Yeah.
Yes.
He made pornography in his attic, at the attic in his attic. Made pornography in his home, in his attic, with other men. Mostly he had sex with guys. He did his wife was involved, but she wasn't necessarily involved with Alfred. Um, and he was a sadomasochist. You should, I wish you had some of those pictures up. There's a Indianapolis Star has a cartoon of Kinsey, and it's the Indianapolis Star, for goodness sakes. And and Kinsey Institute's in Indiana,
Yep.
of him with a S&M book in his pocket, flashing a car with some kids going by, and the father's got or the mother has her hand over the child's eyes, because he's flashing. Well, they made it funny, but it wasn't funny.
Yeah.
We have been following in our country, and legally, our laws were changed based on Kinsey.
Yes.
I talk about that in one of my books. The Model Penal Code was used to change our laws. Of course, it was all funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and publicity through the Rockefeller Foundation. He was himself a pedophile, well, more pedosadist, but more likely a pederast, because the bulk of his victims were boys, little boys, the youngest 2 months of age. How dare I say that? Well, he says it. All I do is look at what he wrote and what he has in his book, in his charts and his graphs. He has a 4-year-old boy who he claimed had 26 orgasms in 24 hours. Now, when I looked at that chart in his own book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, I looked at that chart. I said, wait a minute, a child sleeps at some point. This little boy was not allowed to sleep. He was being tortured. He was being woken up constantly and masturbated, or it turns out that was part of it. Also penetrated. We find that out later. That was one of the English British films that was done on my work, called Kinsey's Pedophiles. So, what we have done, and he was, of course, homosexual, bisexual. He had sex with his wife, had 4 children there, and then that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so he switched just the rest of his life, apparently, to males, I assume, of age. So this was an incredibly deviant man, a psychopath, a sexual psychopath, upon whom we have built a whole belief system, as Donahue said, Phil Donahue said, we based the training of sexologists on Kinsey. We based our training of sexologists on Kinsey. And he said, and Kinsey was a dirty old man, but he wasn't. He said, no, he was married. He was a straight guy, but that wasn't true. We did base, our training of sexologists on a dirty old man, and he was worse. He was a violent abuser. He and his team were torturing these children around the clock and calling it an orgasm. And when children fainted, he wrote this in his books. When children fainted, when they had convulsions, those are not my words, those are his. When they screamed, when they were hysterical, when they struck the partner who was raping them, that was a man who was raping them, the little boys, all under 12.
Oh,
He said they definitely enjoy the experience, and we still quote him. Our psych books, our legal books, our legal information. You know, they're still quoting Kinsey, and all of human sexuality, all of it quotes Kinsey. It's become embedded in the air we breathe, in the water we drink. And we have got to rest him out in order to understand how we got to where we are.
we have watched
Mhm.
5, 6 generations since Kinsey parent children,
Yeah.
and are you telling me, Dr. Judith, that every generation after World War II, Dr. Kinsey has been in the ear of every single parent as the first teacher normalizing sexually abhorrent behavior?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think
Wow.
so. Yeah, we can say that. Remember, in 1948, rape,
Mm-hmm.
rape,
Mm-hmm.
not child rape, just regular old rape, uh, you would could be punished with death in half our states. The other half could give you life, life in prison for rape. Not 6 months, not 4 years. And it was a real deterrent because most of our judges had not been trained yet by Kinsey. Yeah,
Mm.
so our judges were favoring
Yes.
women and favoring children, no question about it. The age of consent was much. You had to be 18 or 21, and it's the lowest was 16. And fornication was against the law.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so the argument he says she said never really existed in those years because whoever the judges believed the girls. The judges believed women. Why did they believe women? Well, they believed women. Feminists would be upset about this because women who were raped really were considered to be kind of damaged goods.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't go to a judge and say that they were raped just off the cuff of, just for to get money or something. I mean, they wouldn't say that unless it was basically what had happened.
Exactly.
So judges would rule in favor of women, and there was payment for alienation of affection. All kinds of laws were in place to protect women and children.
And so, John, and I know I went backwards from looking at this aspect of the sexual process of normalization of offense. But I got to ask you here, John. There are men who are in prison right now who are saying, wait a minute, I was told that this was okay. Why am I being penalized for normal sexual behavior?
Yes. Do you want to follow up with a question? Yeah. As a matter of fact, as Judith was describing Kinsey and her work, the other big part of her work also was looking at how pornography came as a natural result. As a matter of fact, Judith tackled Playboy, and they went after Judith. There's a cartoon from way back when that Judith has shown me in one of the early Playboy editions, I guess. So she kind of became public enemy number one, and so I'm privileged to know her now. As a matter of
Five
fact, without
cartoons.
Judith,
Five cartoons.
uh, but it's fortuitous that the Lord saw fit to have me come across Judith as she was being interviewed on a radio program as I was in Sacramento. It was long before I worked in the prison system. So it was really her revealing what was behind pornography that helped me be able to really focus my work with sex offenders, I think, in an effective way, to especially focus on the role that pornography played. Because you have no sex offending without pornography. Now, prior to pornography, you still had sexual offending. Sexual offending has always followed a consistent path downward into deviance. Deviance is different than lust. Lust is physical attraction. Deviance is the desire to harm, driving satisfaction from harming, especially ultimately knowing that you're creating trauma in someone. So Judith's work uncovering Kinsey, and then Hugh Hefner, as Judith has indicated to me, Hugh Hefner was Kinsey's pamphleteer. So without Kinsey, you would have never had Playboy, and without Playboy, you would never have somebody else may have come along, but he is the father of pornography. And without pornography, well, right now in the year 2020, and this goes back decades now, but it's clear that in the year 2020, or I started in the Department of Corrections in Pennsylvania in 2005.
Yes.
You do not have a single sex offense that does not have pornography involved. Pornography underlies 100% of every single sex offense. And 100% of pedophiles are busted with child porn. 100%. About 98% are also busted for the distribution of child porn. So they not only get it, they can produce it as well, but they won't just hang on to it. They pass it along, they sell it, they do whatever they're going to do. So without pornography, you have, or one way to put it is, look at the increase of sex offenses that we have now. Now, some people say, well, it's because of an increase of reporting laws. I would actually say right now, because of the trans movement, you have a decrease. Because to be somebody involved with kids in some capacity therapeutically dealing with the gender-confused kids, like a gender therapist, you have to purposely reinterpret the primary red flags of sexual abuse. You have to reinterpret that as gender confusion. So I think right now we're having a decrease in reporting compared to really what's going on. But without pornography, you certainly wouldn't have as much child abuse. And so we can thank Kinsey, and we can track back the tidal wave of child sexual abuse and sexual exploitation back to pornography. Even Ted Bundy attributed his offending, how it got started, by finding a pornography magazine, and Judith, in her own research, figured it out that the only thing in existence at that time was a Playboy magazine. Well, look at what we have now with the internet. And so Judith and I we've talked about this. We're both equally concerned about what in the world is happening to the minds of young children when what is far more dangerous and far more extreme and far more blatant and far more impactful is being held in the palm of their hand as far as accessibility using a smartphone.
Yeah.
What would have been X-rated is now a commonplace. I mean, think of 50 Shades of Grey. That's sold in Walmart as entertainment. Well, what you see in bondage kind of stuff now and kink used to be methods of extracting information, so torture methods in the Middle Ages. So,
Dr. Judith,
or Abu, what is it? Abu
Ghraib. That's right.
Yeah, those pictures from Abu
Ghraib. Yeah.
Those pictures are direct imitations embedded in these the captors, right?
Yes.
Direct imitations of what we see in pornography. And no question about it, with the chains and the whips and the things over their heads, all of that comes straight out of pornography.
Dr. Judith, in asking you here, listen, when I was growing up, a couple of guys ran into the 7-Eleven. We put $2 or $3 together. We bought a magazine. We ran around the corner. We took a look at the middle. Ah, look at that. But what's wrong with taking a look at the natural beauty of the naked body as a teenager?
A lot. A lot, because that's not a natural the natural beauty of the human body to begin with.
Thank you.
You know, nobody who appears in those materials, who appeared in those materials, would ever look like that when they step out of it. You know, they're airbrushed. In those years, they were airbrushed, and then they would get new plastic bosoms.
Yeah.
You know, so that they could add those. I mean, the illusion, the vision that, and we won't go into the racial issue here, but it's there, and you know, these kids have this illusion about what women look like. Not only do they have an illusion about what women look like, but what they expect of women. Well, if this woman will take off her clothes and lay out there for you, and after a while, it wasn't just laying out there; it was other kind of poses. It's what you expect of the people that you love, or
Yeah.
you know, the young ladies that you care about. This is all transmitted mentally, yeah, emotionally,
Yes.
into the girls next to you in the chair when you're in school.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in school and you're sitting there and there's that young girl, you're seeing what you've seen in that magazine, and you're expecting that she should respond in the same open way. Now, what's wrong with her that she doesn't want to take off her clothes? You know,
Exactly. There you
of
go.
course, taking off your clothes is putting yourself at disastrous risk. I mean, what woman walks out in the street and takes her clothes off? Yeah.
Yeah.
People will, I mean, a car will come by and pick her up and take her to the Who Scout. Either she'll go to the mental institution, or she'll be raped, or she'll be taken to the police.
Exactly.
Nobody does that. Nobody, because you put yourself in the most at risk situation. There is absolutely a complete absence of self preservation in those displays. And self preservation is what our kids have all lost. They've lost it because they see these images everywhere they look. The females lost it, and the guys lost it. And they all are confused, and it enters into their relationships, it enters into their marriages, it enters into them not getting married, it enters into, you know, the kind of performances in the movies that
Yes.
the young ladies are expected to come up with. It plays its role in what's his name, you know, who is always wanting her to, you know, do stuff in order to get the job. Well, yeah, of
Yes.
course. And it enters into everything. So that innocent little picture that you were looking at was never innocent. Never.
When you
And it was
speak of,
never made to be innocent.
and I'm so glad you went there, because as we proceed in terms of the conversation of the molestation and the hypersexualization of our children through pictures and magazines of that particular caliber, I got to ask you here, Dr. Judith. I'm not as brilliant as the two of you guys. I mean, you guys are super brains. But
All right, all right, all right.
why is it easier to transmit Kinsey's work through pornography than it is just to sit down at the local auditorium and listening to someone speak about Kinsey or read one of those psychology books? Why pornography?
Well, you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, pornography hits you right in the limbic system. It's we know that mirror neurons. You are imitating. You will feel. You will experience
Mm-hmm.
what the person that you're watching is doing. We know that pornography isn't just a demonstration. Look, you turn off, used to be, you had television just only, okay,
Yeah.
and you would turn on the TV and you see the back of somebody's head, and you say to yourself, oh, I've seen that film already.
Yes.
How do you know you've seen that film already? Because it is in your brain. It has already wired itself into your brain, into your memory system. Your body receives the experience. So
Wow.
yeah, there's nothing trivial about seeing pornographic material. There's nothing trivial about it. It changes the very nature of the wiring in your brain. You are absolutely altered by what you're seeing because you're going to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole thing about, why do you cry when you watch a film? Well, the film is just a film. My goodness. Why have tears falling down your face? Because you're
Yes.
experiencing what that is projecting into your brain. And you will be changed. You will be changed. I had a psychologist who watched my presentation, and when I was in Wales, and he said, he thought he had never seen any images in Playboy of children. He was sure he'd
Yeah.
never seen any. Yeah. When he went to my presentation and I put up 80 on one side and 80 on the other side, because we used to use the old fashioned, you know, what do you call it? The little round things, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
We used to use those, yeah,
Little
in those days.
slides. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We used to use those in those days. Yeah. So when he saw my presentation, he walked up to me afterwards and he said, I I have to apologize. I can't believe it. He said, when I saw those pictures, I knew, yeah, the cartoons and the photos
Mm-hmm.
of children in Playboy and Penthouse. I knew I had seen them already. They were in my brain.
Wow.
And he said, I'm a father, I'm a psychologist, and I have 3 daughters. I can't believe, but I know it's true because they are embedded in my brain. I'd seen them. And he's the guy that said to me, well, and if you're really concerned about child sexual abuse, because this was only pornography, he
Yes.
said, you have to look at the Kinsey reports. And I said, why? And he said, well, I worked with Kinsey and Pomeroy. One is a pedophile and the other one is a homosexual. I said, which is which? And he said, read and discover. And he changed my life because I went back to the dirty bookstore in those years,
Yeah.
and I dragged out the books, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, and I read that material and I said, my gosh, and then of course, yes, Playboy Hefner was a virgin in college at
Mm-hmm.
age 22.
Normal.
He read Kinsey and he said, wow, everybody's been doing all these nasty things all along. He said, I will be Kinsey's pamphleteer. And his magazine spun off into Penthouse, which spun off into Hustler, which spun off into global mass pornography. Yeah.
So, and Dr. Judith, before I go to John here, because I'm going to make the correlation between this pornography and what happens in the penal justice system, but mom and dad are allowing children today to watch Nickelodeon, Disney, and other channels, even Adult Swim, and there is very suggestive sexual innuendo that's made. I mean, uh, quite overt expressions of sex, deviance, homosexuality, lesbianism. How does that impact the mind of a 6, 7, 8 year old kid in our society today?
Well, we're rewiring their brains.
Mm.
We're rewiring their brains. And they do not understand what is happening. It's not their fault. Mom and dad seem to think it's okay. And when they go to school, they get the same kind of thing in various ways through
Yes.
through the obscene material that's used in school legally. So they are totally confused. When a child says that they don't, well, I'm amazed at how many these little boys think they're little girls think they're little boys.
Yes.
Um, you know, but usually that's a mother that's pushing that. It's the version of the mother that used to bring her child into the producer who wants to do a film, and she
Yes.
says, and by the way, there are a lot of cartoons in Playboy about that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and so the problems that our children have, that they see themselves as transgender, that they see themselves as homosexual, bisexual, uh, all kinds of whatever. The problems that they have that are put upon them by the adult society that has behaved in such an irresponsible and ignorant way.
Exactly.
It's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. And our kids are paying the price, all of them, in one way or another, all of them.
John, there are young men who are sitting in prison tonight who can't understand that their minds were rewired by the things that they saw in their home, and even some of the introductions that were made to them in the school and in the church. Pornography, sometimes masked as teaching tools. And I want to ask you, for those that you studied regarding pornography, how did it impact them? And is there a way for them to overcome the detriment done to their minds?
Well, I would first of all say 100% of them were impacted.
Mm-hmm.
They're impacted in various ways. Each, though, depending upon how far they went in terms of offense,
Yes.
they've layered, or there's a compounding effect. So some didn't go as far as others. So you will find that maybe it's easier to, quote unquote, rehabilitate them. As I was working with the guys in prison settings, I would issue, the following strong recommendations to them: is they have to stop porn. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
they have to try to rehabilitate their mind. And this speaks to exactly what Judith was talking about and what happens with porn. I do believe, and science now has shown it, Robert Hare was the first to put a psychopath through a brain scan, color imaging, so you can see that The brain actually changes. If someone traverses down far enough, and there's a debate as to whether it's nature or nurture. I don't believe it's either, quite frankly, though each contributes.
Yes.
But essentially, and when we think of psychopaths, most of us think of Alfred Hitchcock's movie Psycho.
Yeah.
That's certainly a psychopath, but that's what I call bloody psychopath. Actually, Robert Hare himself differentiates that between a psychopath and a white-collar psychopath. And he uses the idea of Bernie Madoff, who was head of NASDAQ, who made off with everybody's money. So whether or not you have, and the difference between a bloody psychopath is someone that has blood on their hands, but relatively speaking, has very few victims.
Yes.
You know, the greatest serial rapist and murderer may have, and I'm not minimizing any of this, may have about 80 victims by the time they're caught. But a pedophile who is sophisticated, who is the last person anybody thought would be doing something like that, usually has a couple hundred kids as victims. And how much more sophisticated, because by the time that person's busted, it's been over years and years. And the question is, why didn't any of those kids go to the police?
Yes.
Because they were under the control of sophisticated white-collar psychopath. Psychopathy really comes down to three things. You have violated your conscience to the point that there is no conscience left, and therefore you have no guilt and no remorse and no empathy. So there's no empathy, no remorse, and no guilt because of no conscience. As guys are looking at pornography, and as a matter of fact, Ken, let me, you raised a question to Judith, kind of like, well, you know what is it really all that harmful? Come on, just looking at a picture. Yeah. And, all the time, that would be one of the first questions and one of the first groups in the, either 1 year or 2 year type of group that we would have, low or high intensity. And inevitably, that's going to be one of the first things. And it would take the form of exactly what you just said. Come on, Mr. Uhler, it's just a picture. What harm? Well, now I can reverse that on these guys and ask this. What you have in your mind, you've just described something, but you have some sort of image in your mind, a film or something. Yes. And the question is, what year was that image produced? And to a guy, I can guarantee you they're not thinking of a Playboy fold-out.
Yes.
They're thinking of something now that is film, and probably within the past 10 years, and actually earlier, closer to the present day. So it's interesting that the guys that, regardless of who they are, they will use that same phrase, like, come on, who's it hurting? But for those of us that may be a little bit older, we might think in terms of Playboy.
Yeah.
But guess what they're thinking? So they're trying to justify, and it's far more impactful than even 50 Shades of Grey. I mean, think about the concept. As a matter of fact, these guys think it nothing to put their hand around a woman's neck and begin to choke her and pull her hair and beat her. Yeah. Okay, that's nothing to them. So the question is this: what happens to a guy to get him to a point where sexually assaulting someone is equivalent now to a couple of kids picking up back in the 70s a Playboy fold-out?
Yeah.
What's happened? And so what I challenge these guys to think through is this: how did we get from the 70s to here? Because if I had been talking to guys in prison in the 70s, that's what would be in their mind in terms of pornography, a fold-out.
Yeah.
But if I were to ask them, if I were to paint a picture of what guys are looking at now on the internet, it would have shocked the sex offenders back then. So it's always progressive. And that's part of the nature. And the problem is, and it's interesting in working with the guys that have become deviant. What that means is this: they don't understand normal human relationships anymore. As a matter of fact, they don't even date because they can't date. They can only have a power differential with someone where the woman is being taken advantage of at the very least, if not harmed. And to be able to look at a group of men, I remember the time it finally sunk in that I'm dealing with guys as I was looking around these groups. And I remember the group, I looked at them, I said, you guys don't even know how far you have fallen from normal. That you don't even know what it's like to think in a normal way about a sexual experience with someone you care about, because a normal person cares that their partner, ideally their spouse,
Yes.
in a lifelong committed relationship, is enjoying herself from a guy's perspective. And they don't even think that way anymore. So to introduce the idea and to look at grown men, ponder that you actually care about, and you're actually mindful. As a matter of fact, to share with these guys, said a normal guy, I'll use common vernacular, pardon if anybody's listening, if kids are around, maybe, uh, get them busy right now. But as we all use the common phrase, a normal man can't even get an erection, can't even get it up.
Yeah.
If he knows that his spouse is not in the mood or not enjoying herself. Well, that is so far from a guy who's become deviant. It doesn't even do the picture. That's where, or in response to, Ken, that question, how I respond to the guys is this, that you think it's static. You think pornography is static, but you don't even know. It's like a riptide. It's moving you down the beach. And by the time you are way out to sea, you don't even know. And now you don't know what's in those waters.
Mm-hmm.
And you think you've got everything under control. Meanwhile, there's the Kraken, like on the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, the big squid thing under the surface.
Yes.
And I have interacted with too many guys in long-term solitary that are in for many, many years that will describe when they finally perpetrated really heinous offenses, that something came over them. So this is also a very spiritual dynamic, without exception. And so it turns men, it inverts them. There's a morphing process. There's a twisting process. I plotted it out. There's about 10 different stages. And you can talk to a guy and figure out what stage he's in as he's morphing into a sexual psychopath and getting to a point where he can use someone instead of loving people and using things. He uses people, called objectification.
Yes.
And he loves things. And that doesn't happen overnight, and that doesn't happen without pornography. So wherever in the spectrum of porn that someone is beginning to look, and it's always the gateway drugs in a way. Always, these guys didn't start with hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
So it never stays with that same level of nudity or pornography.
Dr. Judith, tonight,
Very good.
Some
Very good.
parent, some single mom who's spent the day working at her 9 to 5 has gone out to Target and has bought a cuties outfit for their 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, preteen child. Mm-hmm. And they're saying to themselves, it looks cute. I saw it in the movie. She's not hurting anybody and nobody's hurting her. What does that representation do to that child? And how does that put that child at risk?
Well, first of all, let's remember that there's a warning on the Cuties film. Mm-hmm. It's for mature audiences only. M.A. What is it? M.A.
M.A.
What?
That's right.
Mature audiences only. Yeah. Okay. Now they're abusing the little girls in the film. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it says we don't want any children to be seeing this film who are not 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mama, who has fallen into today's world, she's
Yes.
part of today's world. Mama is absolutely doing exactly what the film itself tells you that she shouldn't do. So the girls are going to dress themselves, or they don't dress themselves. Mother dresses the girls, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
in those outfits. And the girls are signaling to people that they are up for grabs, which is what the film does. Yeah,
Yes.
we're up for grabs. You can just do anything you like to do with us. We are adult, but we're better than adult because we are so young.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's freaking eerie. Forgive me, Dr. Judith. That is creepy,
Yeah.
eerie. But
Well, it
there
is
would
pretty.
there would be some mothers that would fight me in the Walmart if I walked over to her and said, that may not be age appropriate. You might want to try maybe a little cheerleading outfit or go as a ghost or something. But is that because abnormal is now normal and it has been generations of abnormality that's been accepted and that's just the way it's going to be from now on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's become normal. Uh, the idea of children being dressed as children, you know,
Yes.
uh, is ridiculed. What are you trying to do to your child? Dressing your child as a child. There was a reason for short pants for boys.
Mm-hmm.
Until they became men. They,
Yes.
there's a reason that that children were dressed as children. It isn't that people were ignorant of others lusting after kids. It's that they were aware. They were aware. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, the society determined children should appear as children and not as little prostituted adults.
Thank you.
These little children, yeah, these little children in this film and in other films, this isn't the
Yes.
only one, um, are being prostituted by their parents, who, if they have parents, or single mom or whatever, and by all the people involved. That's what that is. It's selling children's sexuality. It's selling them as sexual objects, sexual targets, and lewd and lascivious.
Yes.
Um, and the definition of prostitution for pecuniary or other rewards.
You use
People are being paid when they sell their children this way. The producers are paid. The parents are paid for selling their children in this manner. And if they felt that their children should be portrayed as children, they wouldn't get the job.
wow.
So yeah, it's very bad, and the only way to correct this is to start educating people as to where this all came from,
Yes.
how it is supported in the schools through sex education, which is all deformed, really. I mean,
Yes.
it's exceptional when someone is being educated in an undeformed, non-deformed manner. Only their parents should talk to them about sex. Only their parents. I like to say, before before Kinsey, when MOM was the degree and
Yep.
DAD was a degree, yeah.
Yep.
MOM and DAD would be the ones who educated their children, poorly or not, about human sexuality. and our rates of venereal disease and our rates of child sexual abuse were absolutely at the bottom of the barrel, and the scale has now gone beyond description. So MOM and DAD in those years
Yes.
should, did, and it's got to go back to that. But we've got to educate MOM and DAD as to what's normal and what's healthy and what is in the child's best interest. And it's not in the child's best interest to be described as a sexual target.
Exactly. Dr. Judith, one other quick thing for you, and then I'm going to go to Jon here. You use a term called lasciviousness, okay, which is a biblical term. You know, in the millennial generation, that there are fewer worshipers of God in Christianity than in the day of the 1950s, 1960s, when Kinsey began to normalize abnormal sexual behavior. What is the role of the body of Christ in terms of teaching our children to be chaste and our parents to be observers of their chastity?
Well, I would say that the role of Christians, just and the role of Jews and the role of Muslims. I mean, our role
Mm-hmm.
as parents is to help our children to understand that they have a right to their childhood, and they have a right to be chaste, and they should be chaste.
Mm-hmm.
They should be. I mean, my gosh, why not? Why not? Why should children be put into the position of being lascivious, of behaving in lewd ways,
Yeah.
so that they attract that kind of attention? Um, yeah, uh, it is biblical. It is from the very beginning biblical, and it is self preservation.
Yes.
If you want to just be an evolutionist, then think of it in terms of self preservation. You do not present yourself like an animal in lust when you're a child.
Exactly.
And that is how these children are presented. So, from a biblical perspective and from an evolutionary perspective, children should be kept as children until they are of age. And that would be, when their brains have been matured enough, which is really not until their 20s. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And normally
that's what happens.
that's 65 for most men. So there you go. Jon, I want to ask you here because Corey Asbury, who has a huge a song out there called Reckless Love, came out earlier this year and made note that he was exposed to pornography at the age of 12 and he became addicted to it, even though he became a worship leader in his church. And he struggled with that in not only his marriage but also his ministry. And that he literally, in this part of his life, finally gave up the attraction to pornography. I want to ask you here, sir. Church Protect is what you created. Why should parents who love the Lord not submit their children to the social media of this day and age and put them in a situation of addiction?
Yeah, and it also speaks to the question you asked as far as Halloween coming up and why, what's the problem?
Yeah.
And part of the question lies in, I think, how dumbed down we've become. It's like the proverbial frog in the pot of boiling water. We don't even know we're half cooked.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that in the current state of marriage, if marriage is even fashionable anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So you can see this play out in a number of different ways as far as the concern, because typically, as go a husband and wife, so goes the family, or as the marriage goes, so goes the family. And kids are learning about life. They're learning about relationships. They're learning about security and significance and about God from watching the parents.
Yes.
So I haven't come across too many people that reject the idea of God where everything went pretty well. It doesn't mean that things didn't happen and come into the family's life, but if all things being equal, there's exceptions, but all things being equal, you show me a pretty decent husband and wife, and they're going to probably have a pretty decent home.
Yeah.
If something gets all whacked out, then there's going to be fallout. And there's no more crucial issue in the life of a couple than sex and sexuality. God designed it that way, not so much to be crucial, but it is crucial. But it is, it'll either make things for better or for worse. And if sex and sexuality goes awry, then inevitably you will have pain in that relationship. And so the one soul union gets shattered.
Yes.
And all sorts of things come into play. And the vast majority of couples are impacted now by pornography.
Yes.
And so young people now are wrestling with that. And I think what's happened is the average parent now has come up through their own childhood, has been saturated in pornography in one way or another. And so they've lost perspective. They don't necessarily even know what it's like to have a decent relationship, what it's like to have a partner. I'll speak to the women right now. If you ask the average woman if she believes that men will be faithful,
Mm-hmm.
right, they'll say no. Why? Because of what they've seen. How about does love have to hurt? Right?
Yeah.
They can't fathom a one soul union and a lifelong exclusive relationship. That's because it's so rare. And let me kind of come full circle back to the question that you asked. What happens for Halloween now if a mother is picking out a cuties outfit? Because it all kind of comes together in what we watch, what we permit our kids to watch, and what's the big deal. And what Church Protect, because it's the training vehicle for churches, but SurvivorSupport.net is really training for anybody.
Yeah.
What I start with is to try to help adults, but especially mothers, begin to think through what happens within a guy when pornography takes over. And to help them begin to understand that a guy can get to a point where he's not normal anymore, and you will never know it. And so for that mother, let's say that's going to pick out that cuties outfit, and let's say I was standing at that same aisle and mom's by herself and she starts to reach for that.
Yeah.
I might say something like, wow, so you strike up a conversation and you don't want to shame her because she wants her daughter to have a good experience. But she's absolutely clueless because I was clueless. Who of us have really done in-depth interaction with sex offenders?
Yes.
And so maybe a question I might ask her is, hey, what do you think that might do for some guys that might see your daughter? And she might start to think of teenagers. Then if I were to ask her, do you know what, as the homes that your daughter is going to trick or treat, do you think there's any men in there? What do you think some of them might be watching at night? And do you know if they are normal? Do you know what happens when a guy progresses through the various stages of deviance and becomes a predator? Could you pick one out? Could you spot one in a crowd? Do you know what they think? And to help educate someone So as I interact with Christians or churches or, again, any other organization, to begin to help people understand that once a guy has progressed far enough, his brain is changing, as Judith described, it's rewiring. But then there's a spiritual darkness. And what I would say is this: the further down a guy gets, he's not going to be the creepy guy in a trench coat in the park, though those are dangerous people. That's about 2 or 3%. That's a very rare percentage.
Yes.
The majority of guys, the more deviant they become, the more normal they appear. That's why they love going to churches. That's why they love getting on deacon's board and elder's board, because the vast majority of churches cannot meaningfully differentiate. If you were to give them a magic marker and a whiteboard and ask them to plot out the difference between a prodigal and a predator, they would stare and look at you. Because I would have stared and looked at you. I wouldn't have been able to define the difference. I can now. So to help someone understand that what porn does in what deviance does, but porn now, ever since pornography, Hugh Hefner and Kinsey and the internet, it supercharged that process. And so where it may have taken years, now it can take much shorter, but the profound darkness that enters in and the spiritual reality. And so when they find predators, by the time they get arrested, the stuff that's on their, the collection of stuff they have, the pictures, and as a matter of fact, to show you how bad it is, they will typically, a guy that becomes a child offender has gotten into bestiality prior to getting into child porn. So as that mother dresses her daughter in this little cuties outfit, the mother might think it's cute, but the adult looking at the daughter, you don't know what's behind that smile. And for guys that are really given over, that are actually offenders, they're calculating. That is a wonderful night for them. As a matter of fact, sex offenders, the stipulations they're given, they can't be out from what they call their green sheet, and what their probation officer prohibits sex offenders from being out on that night. Well, why do you think? And so by the time somebody becomes dark and really deviant and a child predator, you can't pick him out of a crowd necessarily, and you don't know what's going through his mind. And what he's also looking at is this: he's looking to see the level of sophistication of the parents in terms of the ability to protect and discern. And if I'm a predator, I want to see a child dressed like that, because what do I already know about the mother? She's clueless, and she's the same kind of mother that's going to bring the kid to drag queen story hour and watch a bunch of guys or furries.
Yes.
A furries activity where you have a bunch of men that have their identity covered up, where there's no background check, and we're handing over our kids to men that are putting on women's underwear, or hiding 100% of their identity and accessing kids. But we're projecting onto them that they have the best of intentions. It's not true. Not for those of us that have worked extensively with sex offenders. Now, does that mean every single guy? And no, I'm not suggesting that. But the question is, how many predators in a crowd of 100 does it take to end up targeting and causing real harm? Doesn't take very many.
Jon, I would love to take you to a evangelical convention or a Baptist convention, and ask every single one of the pastors to stand up and look out on the audience and to discern which one of them is a wolf in lamb's clothing. They will probably have a most difficult opportunity in terms of doing that. They need to get with persons like yourself and Dr. Judith to have a better understanding of what exactly they face and their congregations face. And there are people who are watching tonight around the world, Dr. Judith, who honor and adore the work that you have done over the years to protect their children. You haven't even met them, but they adore and appreciate all that you have done. I want to give you the opportunity of closing here, because when I listen here, I'm encouraged by the fact of the knowledge, but I am discouraged by the understanding. The sense that maybe we're losing the war here, and we have to do something to win this war for the sake of our children and our children's children. What must we do legislatively, politically, morally? What do we have to do to cover our children and to protect them from all hurt, harm, and danger? Whether it be simply the television, the iPad, the iPhone, or even in the company of their friends and family. What should we do?
Whew.
And you
All
have
of
three
the above.
seconds.
All of the above. But first of all, I would say tomorrow, if you haven't voted, or not tomorrow, but Tuesday, if you have not voted, I would say you better vote for President Trump,
There you go.
because he has done absolutely more than all the other presidents put together, to try and help our children survive the current onslaughts. Yeah. But
Yes.
yeah, definitely, I would say, I that's my pitch.
Yes.
Vote for President Trump. But and after that, the important thing is to try to get uh, a means to educate the public as to what's been done to them, and to get the legislation in place. We tried to get the Kinsey Institute removed. We have
Yes.
a site that says "Stop the Kinsey Institute," and that has to be done. It can alert people. Lawsuits. And I will be glad to be party to any lawsuits, against uh, institutions, or, well, against schools that are using the Kinsey research, that are using. We went up against that in the American Law Institute, not the Model Penal Code. ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, had a major piece that we did, where we laid out what needed to be done in our schools, because our schools uh, are teaching our children to be deviant.
Yes.
They are teaching our children to be sexual deviants. Not all schools, of course, but in general, yes. So there's enormous amount of work that needs to be done, and I'm up for it. And John, I'm sure, would be up for it. And there are other people, across the country who would be party to that, in globally or nationally.
Well, I will tell you both that I need you both on TECN TV as often as I can get you. I'm going to tell you that the motivating factor of me contacting Judith again was the recent Hunter Biden situation,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
incorrigible things that were found on that laptop. And too often our families go, and what? So what? And people don't understand that speaks volumes to the decadence in our society, that we not only abort our children, but we are willing to sexually abuse and molest our children, not just only in the hotel bedrooms, but also on our very television screens. And so I want to thank you all so much for being here to enlighten so many people who tuned in to watch tonight. And I look forward to you all coming back over the next few months as this particular case with Hunter Biden goes on, so that we can begin to elucidate and as well illuminate those who need direction in their lives. God bless you all. Dr. Judith Reisman,
God bless
Jon
you.
Uhler,
God bless you, Ken.
you guys are simply awesome. God bless you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our town hall tonight. It is truly, truly a great success, our first town hall. I'm president of TECN TV. I'm Ken McClenton. We've been speaking with John Uhler, founder and director of Survivor Support Incorporated, SurvivorSupport.net. You can go to SurvivorSupport.net for more details. Also, Judith Reisman, Dr. Judith Reisman, director of the Reisman Institute. You can go to the Reisman Institute on DuckDuckGo or Brave, however way you wish to do it. You can find her on Facebook and Twitter at Reisman Institute. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do everything that we can do as leaders and as a television network to do something that I've always loved doing, protecting our children at all costs. I want to thank you all so much. We'll be back for the Exceptional Conservative Show live in the next 30 minutes. And during that time period, we're going to have a conversation about the rioting and the looting that went on in Washington, D.C., and what you need to be prepared for on November the 4th. And in addition to that, the need for a third awakening in the United States of America. For all of us at TECN TV, we want to say thank you. God bless each and every one of you, and have a very, 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 very good weekend. Good night.